joint.
sorry.
That's okay. That's a joint effort between the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities, the two UCEDs, University Centers for Excellence. So we are a UCED at UC, and we are a NYSONGer at Ohio State, is also at the Ohio State University. I apologize to all my Columbus friends. Are both UCEDs, and those organizations are required within the same mandate that says we have to have a disability rights organization and a state agency supporting individuals with disabilities. And all of that is in order to support individuals and their families to live the lives that are in front of them, and to do it with grace and support. So we'll go ahead and get started. If you guys have any questions about our organizations or how to find Family Resource Network of Ohio, or you're curious about the Supported Decision-Making Network of Ohio, please just throw it in the chat box and we'll answer some more questions as we go. Go ahead, Josh.
So,
am I starting? Oh, I'm starting. Hello. So what we want to do today, last week we covered the why, correct? And this week we want to go into the what about decision making. So why are we having a conversation was last week around decision making, kind of getting into just really thinking about, where you guys were in this process and what brought you to the room and who brought you to the room. And I'm super excited to see that folks are coming back. Those of you that weren't here last time, don't worry. You'll be able to hang with us and won't feel out of sorts. We are looking at making sure that when you leave this space, you have some tools to start playing with the concepts and the ideas that we shared with you. So we'll go ahead and get started on this. What does it take? What does it really mean to be making a decision? We're going to kind of pull that apart a little bit. So go
Celia,
ahead.
excuse me, I'm going to put the poll in.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
Yes. And where is it? There it is. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Okay. And thanks for putting in the chat where you're from. We did that last week. So thank you for reminding me. So, oh my goodness, Suzanne, you're a little bit of everything, aren't you? So if everybody wants to put in the chat quietly where you're from, and go ahead and answer the poll. Oh, did I accidentally end it? Oh, I thought it was.
Is it over?
I think I accidentally ended it. Go ahead and open it up again. I think that was my fault. I apologize.
I relaunched it.
Okay, thank you.
We'll let Josh handle it.
I tell you, there's so many times I say that out loud lately. All right, Josh. And now I lost the poll. Oh my goodness, Celia.
Are you doing? Oh, he's doing it.
No, I just was going to look at it so we could share with who's here. Can you see it?
I can see it on my screen. Can everybody else see it?
Yeah, I can too.
Get some answers. So,
are we getting answers? Good.
Yeah, 3.
This is one of those things where we will share with you. Sherry knows this. Suzanne knows this. They've been here before. This really is a cooperative effort in these conversations. There's information we have to gain from you to move forward to make the presentation work. So when we ask a question, I often jokingly say it's not rhetorical. We really do need input from you, and we'll encourage you in different ways to do that. Thanks, Polly.
Great. We got
Okay.
five people participated.
Okay, I did not. Did you?
You ready to end the poll?
Yeah, go ahead. We've got everybody in there.
Share the results. So it looks like 1 out of 5 currently support a person who wants to be a self-advocate. 4 out of 5, I want to learn more about how I can support a person to become a self-advocate. And another person, I'm here to learn. I don't know very much about supported decision-making. You are in the right place. What role best fits you? 3 out of 5 people, parents of people with disabilities. 1's a professional in the field. 1 is a parent and a professional in the field.
Okay. I'm a parent too, and a sibling. So that's my little space. But all right, Josh, go ahead.
And then 3, how did you hear about this webinar series? 4 out of 5 email, and 1 of them on Facebook. Last question, have you heard of Charting a Life course yet? 5 out of 5, yes.
Woohoo! Means I'm doing my job.
All right. So let's do just a quick review from last time. And again, if you weren't here last time, this is where you can jump on in. So we talked about self-determination, and that's what a lot of this stuff comes back to. So let's make it even simpler to understand this time so we can remember it better. So first, we're going to call this control. So control is just that feeling that you have control over your life and your decisions. You can act with intention, that you can basically take action to change your circumstances in your life. And then we're going to call this capability. So being able to get good at something, it requires opportunities, right? And a lot of times we're going to fail before we get good at something, but we still have to have those opportunities if we're going to build that skill. And finally, connections. So we need to be connected to people, to others, especially people that we trust who are able to support us. And if we have those things, then our motivation kind of changes from external motivation, basically doing things because somebody expects us to do it, or we feel pressured to do it, we feel an obligation to do it, to intrinsic motivation, which means we're acting because we want to do this, right? So when we have these things, we have self-determination. And remember, having more self-determination leads to better lives for people. So our role as supporters is to encourage and promote this in creative ways and person-centered ways, whatever ways they need. But we are all different, so support is going to look different for each of us. It can even look different for the same person under different circumstances, and we will talk about that a little bit in a few slides. But how do we even know or recognize that someone has it, the self-determination? What is it actually? Well, we're going to talk about the difference between independence and interdependence here.
My turn. There you go. So this is something we talk a lot about in the Charting the Life course space, and when you're in a room, if I'm speaking, because we really want to get at the crux of this, because we hear independence thrown around a lot, especially as we're getting older, we're transitioning, things like that. Those are words that we use, but what we also know is that we all work together in our day-to-day lives every day. Very few of us work in isolation, right? So when we think about building these circles and having this conversation around helping someone be a decision maker and supporting someone to make their own decisions, we talk a lot about having more than one person doing that. We all have our go-to person, but sometimes our go-to person varies, right? But more than one supporter is best. And each of us, when at our most content, even those of us who aren't people-y people, feel most capable when we have or are working on building connection and a network of people around us. And as supporters, we need to kind of take a deep breath and consider that we're not going to always be here. We're not going to be here till the end of time. And so when we think about supporting anyone that we care about or want to see succeed, we want them to have a network of people in their lives that allow them to get a number of different perspectives as they move through their life and have their experiences. In our day-to-day, we're very seldom stuck somewhere where we can't access help from others in our day-to-day lives, right? Even strangers. We have friends, we have strangers, we know people with more knowledge than us, we know people with different experiences than us that we can potentially tap into. You talk to your mechanic, you talk to a stranger and ask directions. They have different or more experience or resources. So often we take for granted and don't even realize those times when we actually have help making decisions. And so when we might even mistakenly think that we made decisions all by ourselves and that we just magically came up to that wonderful conclusion, but we've gathered information along the way that we don't even necessarily know that we're kind of looking to others. So even something as simple as watching or hearing about someone who made a decision whose outcome was something that we wouldn't want. People who do blank often get fired. Okay, I'm going to make note of that and hold that back in my little bailiwick. Grown-ups do that on their own or without help. So if you're a grown-up, you do it without help. When you get older, I won't be there to help. One thing that we often said at our house was, when you get to, they do something at home, within the community of the family. And I would say, when you get to college, that thing you did right there is not going to work. It's not going to work for you. So in the world of special education and education in general, actually, we often hear repeated that we need them to be more dependent. We often measure things that mastery is going to be noted when they can do it independently, right? We give the impression that we have to do this all by ourselves. Or somehow it doesn't count. It's not real if we can't do it all by ourselves independently. So what happens is when we find ourselves as young adults or with supporting young adults who don't feel competent or confident in getting something accomplished if they can't do it without help. And yet, especially after COVID, I think this is a case for me, and I'd be curious if folks would add to the chat if they feel that way. But especially after COVID, very few of us get through any day without some sort of support or help. Getting it done is the desired outcome now. It's not whether or not you did it without help or did it perfectly. And so I think paying attention to that and thinking about that. The other thing that I often see or hear from families and parents when it comes to making decisions is the avoidance of making a decision at all, especially if they don't know what you want them to do, right? The right decision is the decision that gets approval from others. And let's face it, as parents, as family members, as supporters, when they make the decision that we wanted them to, that can feel like a real win, right? But if every decision I make is simply made with one consideration, and that is that making that decision is because you want me to, or because I'm avoiding upsetting you, it's truly not what drives life decision making. That's not building the life that you want and doing the things that you want. So, but that false perception that this is and will keep our children safe if they just do what we want them to do or what we've taught them to do, or the decision that we've always told them is the best decision, that's somehow going to keep us safe. That's really kind of a false feeling. But what we know is that life is fluid and so are decisions. So there's not one answer that's right in every situation. Take secrets, for example. There are good and bad secrets. We can never say always keep secrets. And we can never say never keep secrets. And none of us make decisions by ourselves, right? So as you consider how to provide growth for the person that brought you to this room, for the folks that you support, for the child that you support, number one, remember who the decision maker goes to for support shouldn't be just you. There shouldn't just be one person. We get used to what parents or those that we see all the time want us to say or what they always say. And in fact, I think a lot of us as family members know that sometimes going to someone else and having them say the exact same thing that we said often is heard differently or heard as some great new information when we've been saying it all along, right? And that means that sometimes they don't take us seriously as a decision maker or as someone that has valued advice. So having more than one person and that interdependency can really be beneficial. Thinking about ways to share with them in real time how you make decisions. Oh, I called your dad and I was talking to him about this because I'm thinking about this. Oh, I read an article, and letting them know you don't make these decisions in a vacuum. You don't automatically know what to do in any given situation, and modeling that behavior for them is hugely important. Go ahead. But the biggest reason I want to think more about interdependence than independence is illustrated right here. And that's that idea of isolation. The danger of continuing to be only independent in its simplest form can lead to isolation. It can lead to misinformation. If we're only getting information from one source, we can be misinformed. Again, that can lead to that place that parents are often afraid of and fear the most, being taken advantage of, right? So that idea of helping your child build this network of support that help them and they go to, and I might go to one person for one and another for another, but when we have people, we have many different perspectives and many different experiences to learn from. Go ahead, Josh. So what I want to do next, and I'm gonna poke my folks, because I told you at the beginning, this is kind of interactive and it is going to be richer and you're going to get more from it if you'll all at the very least unmute. I think with a smaller group, Josh, do you feel like we could go into pairs in the breakout rooms in twos, or should we just kind of talk about it together?
I think keep it in the main room and just see what people have to say about it.
That's what I was thinking. All right. So if folks are willing to, please, because it will make my life really hard if you don't, I want you to unmute and share with me when you look at this. So first thing I want you to do is think about you. Now, I know last time we said think about you, and I'd say we got about 50%, and about 50% snuck in thinking about the people that brought them to this room. And I'm going to push you again and say, think about you. And Josh, if you, I don't know if you can do this on your computer, if you wave underneath the actual slide, do you see the magnifying glass?
Yep.
Okay, will you click on that and just bring up closer on both of these? Do you know how to do that? It'll bring us, there you go, there you go. Okay, so these are tools to help you begin talking about decision-making, think about decision-making. And I want you to think about it with you. So when you look at this, obviously, you don't have to necessarily write this all out, but you can to help you think about it. But in this space, I just want you to think about people that help you make decisions. Who are your kind of go-to people that help you make decisions? And then if you look to the right, how or what decisions do they help you? How do they help you with those decisions, right? Do they help? Is this the person you go to that you want information in? Is this the person that you go to that helps you understand what may happen or not happen? Is it if you're talking about a relationship, and an intimate relationship or a love relationship, do you go to one person for information, or do you go to a different person? And is it the same person that you talk to about employment, that you talk to about a relationship? And then down at the lower part of that half, thinking about what kind of support you need continuing into this process of decision making with each person, looking and putting their name there and saying, what do they help you with? What are they a good person? And it may change from person to person. But when we do this in small groups, we would have you really kind of think about who those people are and how you identify. And I really want you to think about it from the standpoint of stepping away from your go-to. If we do a star in Charting Life Course for the first time, when we go to the relationship corner of the star, it's another tool. And I say, who are the relationships in your life that help you and support you? Partner, sibling, child. But I want you to step a little bit past that. And who is it that could help you make decisions besides those absolutes, those right in your household people? Because some of us need to go a little bit beyond that, so that, I used to say to my daughter, who's the person that you could call for a ride? Certainly husband, those people, but let's stretch a little bit. If you got nobody answered the phone, who would be the next person out? So that second circle. Can you come up with, go ahead?
Be neighbors, close by neighbors.
Okay. And so as you think about one particular neighbor, you don't have to tell me their name or anything, but just as you think about them, and if you put maybe even two neighbors on this sheet that you're seeing in front of you, would you be able to utilize them? What would be your go-to, or are some of these fit or not fit?
Yeah, I mean, one neighbor's known our son for, since he was born, and they've interacted with him and had relationship with him. So I can go to them to, talk through concerns I have and get their input, because they've spent time with them. So they have a relationship. So they're somebody I can bounce a lot of things off of.
Beautiful. I love that they, that somebody, I used to always say, who notices when they're not with you? Who's the person that comes to you and go, where's, Tom, where's Sue? We haven't seen her in a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, and they, they're not your immediate circle. Is
Right.
anybody else willing to unmic and share something similar?
I would say, well, my number one would be my husband, but my number two, my best friend.
Okay. Okay.
And I think, all of these really, I would go to her.
For
Yeah.
any of this. She knows you well.
Yeah.
And it's nice when you have somebody a little bit outside of your daily experience. I often say,
Mhm.
think of that person that knows disability just because they know you, right? So hearing what Suzanne said, hearing what you said, that they know your experience, they've lived it alongside you, and they're a person that you can lean into sometimes when making a decision. But the reason we have you go through this task is so that you really think about, how do I help the person I'm supporting think about those people in their lives, and think about those people's roles in their lives in how they help you, and kind of talking through that. Does that make sense? Anybody else want to add something real quick?
I can real quick.
Mhm.
I mean, like when I think about it, for myself, when I make decisions, I reach out to, I definitely say, friends, but I also reach out to maybe connections that I might have of people that might have knowledge on things. So Celia, reach out to you for Trying Life course when I'm trying to think of my plans for myself or the person I support, or, maybe I reach out to an SSA to pick their brain on, I don't know, activities are out there, but who they might know. Or I might reach out to a speech therapist or a friend that might also have a kid in the same situation. But I reach out to people that might have knowledge that I can then take and maybe go and ask somebody else something, or kind of just people that might be knowledgeable on certain topics in order to gather information.
Absolutely. So I might not come, nobody should come to me for gardening tips, but there are people that have that knowledge, right? And I think the important thing that I want you to do here is, you might think it's silly to look at these and go, I'm never going to fill this out about my neighbor, about my friend, or about, but I want you to know that when we're struggling, when things aren't happening, when we have to do something like that, and we've gone through and thought about this, you will be less likely, and I get these phone calls a lot from families to say, I don't have anybody, it's just me. And so thinking about this ahead of time, you came and devoted this time, jotting down 3 or 4 people somewhere where you can look. If when I'm in a pinch and I don't know what to do and I'm kind of stuck, who's somebody I could call and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I did it today before I jumped on this call. So just think about that, because when in the moment, when I get those phone calls with families, I do this work and invariably there's somebody outside that immediate circle. So go ahead, Josh. I took this pretty long, sorry. Got
Right.
passionate.
Does anybody want to kind of weigh in on what they think capacity is? Any ideas?
Should we call on people?
I mean, I can.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this term came up when we looked into, setting stuff up for the person that we support.
Mhm.
And it was important that they had capacity. So, were able to state if they wanted help and what they would want help with. And I mean, it didn't have to be an exact science, but just at least saying like, yes, I would want this person to help support me or help me with decision making. So they had the understanding of what they were agreeing to.
Yeah. So technically, capacity is a medical term that doctors make a decision about, right? But the way that we're talking about it is really, can this person make certain decisions? Do they have that capacity to do that? And so there are ways that we can have those conversations that help us get a better sense of where there's capacity and maybe where there's not. But the important thing here is that capacity is not static. Capacity can change. For example, I might have capacity to make certain decisions later in life that I didn't have earlier in life because I've gained skills and experience, right? Or another example would be that I typically have capacity to make some kinds of decisions, but something traumatic has just happened, or I really haven't slept in a couple of days very well, right? My capacity might be diminished because of that. I actually did a presentation earlier today and somebody said that they were working with someone who had a really bad UTI and her capacity was diminished while she was dealing with that. Now, that doesn't mean that her capacity was permanently affected, but she did need a little extra support while she was dealing with that, right? So capacity can change over time. It's not fixed. But what can we do to kind of get a sense of the capacity of the people that we care about?
So one way we can utilize, we want to, again, wanting to emphasize tools. I'm going to ask you to do that magical thing again, Josh, with the little microscope, or is that what it's called? Not microscope. That. What's that called?
Magnifying glass.
Thank you. Vocabulary is a thing for me lately. So magnifying glass. So is kind of a way to assess this, right? And this is a great Charting a Life Course tool that you can kind of hold up, and it gives you things to think about. Since all 5 of you are aware of Charting a Life Course, and all 5 of you may have heard of the domains, this tool is set up, or this assessment, it's an informal assessment, and it can be done by you. It's nice when you ask the person and walk through it with them and have them fill it out. Or even just casually working into conversation here and there. But what it does is it boils down that it used to be called the stoplight tool, and it was kind of red, yellow, green, and green represented stuff you're able to do on your own. But this just kind of goes through by domain. Can I decide if or where I want to work? Can I look to and find a job in things like daily life and employment? Then you see it does each domain, safety and security, community living, and it just begins a conversation. And that's the beauty of the Charting a Life Course tools in any space, is it just gives you a place to start talking about things and saying, hey, are you comfortable doing that completely alone, or do you want help from others? So it's just another great tool for that. I can decide with no extra support. I need support with my decision. I need someone to decide it for me. And sometimes that's because I have no interest in doing it by myself. And other times it's because I just don't feel comfortable and confident. And then you can start working on ways to build that confidence. Go ahead. It's me again. So again, you may be familiar with the Charting a Life Course tool of the trajectory. And Josh and I talked a lot about in this process how important it is as a supporter to listen. I'd like to say it is the most important thing you will do as you're trying to revision how you support your child or the people that you work with to be decision makers in their lives. The listening part is the most important. The more listening you do, the more options you might hear about, the more listening you do, the fewer opinions you might throw in, the more listening you do. You might hear of other times they made decisions and had a good or a negative experience, and help them recognize that. Go ahead. But ultimately, in this Charting a Life Course trajectory, it's just a great tool to think about or fill out. Again, I'm not about filling them out as much as I am thinking in the framework, but thinking about what do you want and what do you not want? Because often when we get paralyzed in decision making is we can't quite make the balance between the two, or we haven't recognized both of them. So that idea of I don't know why my slides aren't changing. There we go. That idea of being sure to hear what they're saying and recognize that the what I don't want box has a direct correlation to the what I want box. Often we'll stop making decisions that allow us new experiences because of all the things that we are afraid of. And those are going to show up in the what I don't want. What are you trying to avoid? What are you trying to stay away from? Where what I really want to see happen in any decision is going to go up in that want box. But having that discussion and both of you reflecting on what you want and what you don't want, especially when it's a big decision. right? When we think about partnering with somebody to make a big decision and we support each other, buying a home, taking a new job, you do all of this. It's just sometimes nice to have the visual and the reinforcement of being heard when they see their words on a piece of paper of what's important that it doesn't happen and what's important that does happen. Okay, go ahead. Josh is going to share another tool.
All right, and before we go to this tool, when we think about listening, it changes over time. As we get older, as they get older, the people that we love and support, it's going to move more from giving opinions and giving feedback to listening. And what that does is it allows more space for that decision maker to grow, to learn, to act with intention, right? Because we're not filling that space with our influence as much. All right. So one of the ways that we can really support people is by getting a better understanding of how they make decisions or how we can support them under different circumstances. So this tool is a decision-making profile, and it really asks us to practice some self-awareness, which is another important part of self-determination. So I'll share a little bit about me and how I use this tool, and I'd love to hear from some of you, even if it's just one column here that sort of resonates with you. So if you're going to help me make decisions, here's some things you should know. I like to get information, that first column, in pictures, visuals, videos, things like that. Now, can I read a manual with a lot of text in it? I can. And about 2 pages in, I'm going to be bored out of my mind, right? So if you're helping me make a decision, give me information that has visuals in it. How to present choices to me. Do not tell me what to do. This isn't my proudest feature, but if you tell me what to do, my first instinct is to do the opposite, right? Now, I know that about myself, and people who support me also need to know that about me. The other thing is I'm the weird guy who goes to the store and buys a different kind of toothpaste every time. I don't buy the same brand. Do you know how many kinds of toothpaste there are out there? It's like 100 different kinds. So when I'm at the store, I'm looking at 100 different toothpaste, and that's hard to make a decision when I'm looking at that many. Narrow it down for me. Give me 4 kinds to choose from, and I'll do much better. So don't overwhelm me. Ways you can help me understand. I love analogies and metaphors. Those things really help me understand and put myself in someone else's place. When is the best time for me to make decisions? There's probably not a specific time of day, but when I'm having a good day, when I'm happy or at peace, those are good times for me to make decisions. But when's a bad time for me to make a decision? I do know this. Between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., I should not be making any important decisions. I should not be ordering things off of Amazon during those times, because I think I need it in the moment, and then I wake up the next morning and see that it has already shipped, and I wonder what I was doing. I'm just in a different headspace, right? But beyond that, I know that I shouldn't be making important decisions when I'm sad, right? When I've had a bad day, when I'm angry or upset. I'm more likely to be impulsive then. So I know that about myself, but I need everyone who supports me to know that about me too. So how about any of you? Do any of those columns resonate with you? And if so, what do you know about yourself?
Well, this is Deb. I'm a visual learner. So show me how to do it. I'll watch you, and then I'll try it. And I may have to ask them to do it again. But once I understand the process, then I can do the task.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, so if someone is supporting Deb and they don't know this about her, and so they tell her what to do, and then maybe it doesn't get done or doesn't get done the way that they wanted it to, well, they didn't provide the right support, right? So it's important to know these things. Who else? What do you know about yourself?
I like to talk to people about things. I think when I'm trying to make a decision, so, whether it's just have them listen to me, or so I'm kind of thinking it through and processing it, or to also get some feedback of things that maybe I haven't thought about or ways to approach things. Because sometimes, in the moment, if you're making decisions, you can sometimes make a quick, rash, heated decision. And then sometimes if you've at least taken some time, talked to somebody, at least like take a step back, it helps with the decision-making process.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate. And I have noticed distinctly kind of two kinds of people when they make decisions. There's a person who, when they want the information, they go straight to the one person that they think is going to have the answer or the advice that they need. And then there's the other person that is going to talk to as many people as they can until they feel comfortable with their decision, right? And I'm sure there's everything in between as well. But yeah, we all need something a little bit different to feel comfortable making our decision. Anybody else?
Hey, Josh, I have one more. My disability is just hearing loss, but having a sibling where the focus was around him, it was easier for my parents to make the decisions for me. So when my mom passed away at 34, I felt really dumb, helpless. And, we talk about helpless?
Learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. And that's something that I did not want to do for my daughters. So I just thought I would share that.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Holly,
I found
there we go. Go ahead.
I found that if I have like a big decision to make and I think it through and then I make the decision, if I keep coming back to it, it's like something is telling me that I haven't really made the right decision yet.
Mhm.
So, especially for something like, jobs or
Mhm.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. And we're going to get into that in a little bit here when we talk about reflecting on the decisions that we've made. All right, so what about actually making decisions? Because there is actually some basic logic that we can follow, 3 components to being able to make decisions here. So the first one is choice. So this describes like what the decision maker can do. There have to be multiple courses of action for a decision to be made. They have to be able to choose between things. With only one course of action, there's just no decision. So are they choosing from different locations for a vacation? Are they choosing from different job opportunities? Are they choosing what time to come home? Are they choosing between taking a risk and learning something and having fun, or avoiding the risk and possibly missing out on something cool? And then they have to have a preference. Actually, we're going to do information next. Then they have to have the information that they need. It's key, right? Do we have enough of it to make an informed decision? Do we need to learn more about something? If so, who or where can we go to get that information? Online, experts, friends, family. What do we need to know about applying for a credit card, for example, or using social media and talking to people online? Because it's not all bad, but we need to know some things in order to make those kinds of decisions. And then finally, there needs to be a preference. The decision maker needs to prefer a certain outcome. What do they want to have happen? Do they want that 3rd shift job at the gas station, to go on vacation with friends? Do they want a tattoo or to drive a car? We typically all prefer one outcome to another. We've all been there where you're trying to coordinate lunch plans with people and somebody says, yeah, I don't care, wherever. And you say, all right, well, how about Mexican? And they say, well, maybe not Mexican, right? We all have preferences. It's just, how do we get to them? And if we're struggling to get to somebody's preferences, sometimes we just have to try things and see what the response is. We'll learn whether somebody prefers it or doesn't prefer it. All right, so then what is informed decision making? What is that all about? So let's strip it down to just its basics. In order to make an informed decision, a person really needs to know, A, what their options are. They need to be able to weigh those options. And then after they weigh the options, they need, one second, I lost my train of thought. All right, we're going to go on to this one, which makes this clear. So informed decision making can be presented to people like this. And I do this with students a lot. So when I'm talking to students, I'll say, all right, you can have chicken nuggets or you can have a hamburger for lunch. right? So when I ask that, half the students raise their hand for chicken nuggets, half the students raise their hand for hamburger. And then I say, oh, actually, you know what? I forgot. You can have pizza too, but if you already voted, you can't vote again. And then I hear a lot of groans and complaining. And so the illustration there is, yeah, wouldn't it have been nice to know all of your options before you made a decision? So that's a really important part of informed decision making. Know all the options, be able to weigh. And I remembered the third part, it's have some sense of how that decision is going to impact you in your life. Now, we don't have to know every hypothetical, but have some sense of that.
So as you look into this, you could probably find 15 different descriptions of what the steps are to decision making. And I think it really doesn't matter which format you follow, but that there are steps and that we all move through them, and they're called different things. But the reality is this, that you need to make sure that you're finding out what the options and choices are in front of you, as Josh just indicated, and getting all the information you can, right? So when you think of yourself as a supporter, I want you to think about what would that role be? If you're supporting a friend, if you're supporting a husband, if you're supporting your child, if you're supporting a neighbor, it really shouldn't vary that much from person to person. The intensity with which you do it, the frequency with which you do it, et cetera, may change, but the steps shouldn't, right? Weighing the choices. And this is a part that any decision maker comes to others for help likely around, gathering information or doing this, right? And then there's that act of deciding, right? And in that act of deciding, I think listening is key. Now, I think listening when we're finding options is and kind of identifying information, super important too. Weighing choices too, because you're going to give feedback. But in that deciding space, then you can share that feedback because you were listening and you heard them, and you can bring back to, I heard you say, I heard you wonder, I sense this fear, whatever it is, right? And then the next step is acting on that decision and really thinking about how to go about acting on that decision. And do they have all the information that they need to do that and supporting that, right? But what you want to do through all of this is listen for your own biases, or at least be aware of your own biases, that instinct to jump in. Ask yourself, what is your purpose of jumping in, right? Would, you know, what the question I ask myself when I'm working with my child is, if this were my friend, would I jump in here? If this were my friend, would I share this thought? Or would I go, that's super cool, how'd you come to that decision? And reminding myself, because typically if the answer is different, it may be driven by bias, right? Listen through yourself, trying to save them from hurt or avoiding pain. Obviously, we don't want them to get hurt, but sometimes there's that, oh shoot, the term, Josh, help me. Something risk. Dignity of risk.
Yep.
Dignity of risk. In that idea that sometimes decisions are painful. Sometimes what we're giving up is painful, but something that we have is great too. So listening to where they might be the most successful and help them recognize that. But if they don't choose that, that's really okay. That's their experience, and we all learn from our own experiences. You don't have to help them or guide them or intercede. And you don't have to, as you're going through this process and trying to support decision-making and kind of let them see where they're, you want them to start strong. So recognizing those places and spaces where they're gonna make decisions easily and successfully so they can believe in their own capacity. So you don't have to start out letting it, or not letting it, check myself, help me with a word there. Going through this process and what you're learning today in every space. So, and you can see, you saw me just learning there. So as a mom, I'm really kind of wandering through this alongside you. But, and it to that end, avoid saying things like letting and allowing, because that's where you're checking in as not a supporter, but as a different role. And so part of facilitating this process is getting out of the way and then taking the minute to reflect back. Okay, does that help? All right, next slide. I think this is huge. Oh yeah, okay.
All right. So what kind of happens as we grow as supporters is it becomes less important, not unimportant, but less important what decision the person actually makes, and more important, the process they use to make that decision, right? Thinking through it, applying these things. So one of the ways to think about this, if you remember from our first session, the who wants to be a millionaire analogy, we can present decisions like this. Let's pretend that a person needs surgery. Doesn't matter what kind of surgery, but they need a surgery. What's important here is all the ways that we can get help to make that decision. And these are just a few, right? So maybe you just make a pros and cons list. You weigh what's good about it, you weigh what's bad about it, you talk through those things, and that can help you make a decision. Or you talk to somebody who had the surgery before. These are all suggestions we can give to a decision maker. They can then pursue. Or get a second opinion. And I will tell you from my experience, most people with disabilities that I've spoken to don't know what a second opinion is, let alone know that they have the right to a second opinion, right? Or maybe choose not to get it, because a really important part of there's a communication bill of rights is supporting people to reject or say no. That always has to be an option when people are making decisions. Not necessarily one that we always agree with, but it's still an option.
Sorry. So let's look at some situations and see if we can come up with ways to help these people make their own decisions. Again, I'm going to need you to unmute and talk to me in the least restrictive and most supportive way possible. So here you've got Dan, and Dan is...
It's Chris.
Chris? Oh, sorry, Chris. My notes say Dan. I didn't look up. The decision he's trying to make is around, he's a new entrepreneur. So Dan has a new way that he's dabbling with money, and he started a newspaper route, right? He's 12 years old, lives with mom and dad, and he's got this money coming in, but he's really never had money before, right? And so what's the best way to, and what do I do with my money? So what options might we talk to him about in terms of, now I've got this new income coming in at 12 years old?
The idea of want versus need.
There you go. Thank you.
Set them up with a savings account. And
Yeah.
I know for me, when I started my first job at 12, we had an agreement where we made a set amount where this amount would go into our savings, and then what was left after that amount is what I could use towards things I wanted. So that way, I had that responsibility of maintaining an amount, and then what was extra that I could, have fun with it.
Yeah. So you're kind of helping them to learn, just values that you share and that you want to share with them as far as how to manage and what to do with it. Right.
Right.
What else might he need to help make his decision as far as what to do with money?
I set a goal of what I wanted to save something towards. So that way you can kind of learn what it takes to build up to that amount.
Okay. And how might we help him learn what his preferences are?
How much different things would cost, of what type of items he wanted, whether it was like clothing or games or foods that he would like candy or things of the likes.
Yeah. Because something that I think I like might not be worth it to me if it costs more than something I kind of like almost the same. And so
Yeah.
it might be driven by how much it costs, but it might be that I don't care, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's see. Whoops. So as you see here, there's lots of different options. And with Dan only being 12 years old, and if Dan was a different age, we might be having a different conversation. We might be talking about a joint bank account, or we might be talking about managing Social Security benefits, or so age certainly makes a difference, right? But right here, we're talking about just understanding, and I love the idea of apps and getting them connected to technology support. We in Ohio are a huge technology support state and want to see that happen, and not just technology that's in the disability world, but just that shared technology that everybody uses. So apps that help you work with and understand the use of your money and can see it visually and how it disappears or comes back or whatever, because it's hard to see that money that's in a bank, right? Okay, go ahead, Josh.
All right, so let's talk about Maggie next. Let's get to know her just a little bit. So Maggie's 32. Her doctor has recommended surgery, and she's scared. She does not know if she wants to have this surgery or not. Something else you should know about Maggie is when she talks to her doctor, she doesn't really understand what he's saying, right? And somewhat as a result of that, when she gets back home, she doesn't always follow the doctor's recommendations or orders. So the question that Maggie needs help with is, what should I do about this? My doctor's recommending surgery. So what are ways that we can support Maggie? What options can we talk about with her?
I was thinking maybe we could ask the doctor to be clearer in his recommendation and why it's important, but use my kind of language, which is simple.
Yep. Speak to me in words I can understand, right?
There you go. Yep.
What else?
Any chance Shauna and Tiffany want to chime in? Otherwise, anybody can chime in.
Suzanne said, my parents had the same process for us. I had something similar for my own children, just not as strict as my parents.
Yeah, she was talking about the funding of the money earned.
Oh, back at the bank comment. Okay, I was
Yeah.
trying to, there you go.
But with the surgery one, I think she might have a hard time getting the doctor to kind of speak to her understanding. I think you'd have to find like a nurse practitioner or someone else more attuned to speaking with those with disabilities to help them to understand the medical issues she was having that could make her more comfortable. I don't think her doctor's necessarily going to give her that. So she'd really have to find an advocate more that could put it on her level to make her comfortable.
And Suzanne, you bring up a good point, and I think as a supporter, it's important to think about, and especially as you move into adult medical, is just looking at her and speaking to her, even if we need the help of someone later to interpret or give it to her in a way that she can better understand in the moment. But teaching our medical providers to speak to our folks and have them understand, and in the moment, maybe supporting them by saying, can you put that in simpler terms?
If the proposed surgery is relating to the condition that has her disabled, maybe seeing if there is one of the organizations specific to the disability, and they might have some resources on their website, on their social media.
That's great. Like we can do a lot of things here. We can get really creative with this, right? So we can start with something as basic as a pros and cons list. We can look at a HIPAA release, which is kind of what Suzanne was talking about. Get somebody else in there who can better understand the doctor and then explain it to Maggie in a way that she can understand. Maybe there's some technology, and maybe this technology is less about getting the surgery and more about how to follow through with the treatment or the recommendations when she's home. Is it an alarm, reminders, things like that? Or a second opinion, possibly a power of attorney, if she'd like somebody else to make some of these decisions for her.
So now we get to meet Jason. And Jason is 23 years old and is currently in an apartment living with two roommates that he's not getting along with, and he doesn't like his current living situation. He's thinking about the possibility of living alone or maybe moving in with a couple of friends. He currently doesn't feel well or hear well, not feel well, hear well. But the other part of this is that his friends, they are all over 23. And so they are legally allowed to drink, but Jason's not much of a drinker and his friends kind of think that's kind of cool. And he doesn't so much mind, but they kind of pressure him a lot. And he's aware of that. But he's kind of trying to figure out how or what he might do in steps of and consider when making a decision. How would you support him?
Well, for one, you start looking at all the ways that you can support the portion where he doesn't hear very well. Maybe he's more of a visual processor.
Polly, what comes to mind for me when you say that is, it says he doesn't get along with his two roommates, but he also doesn't hear very well. Are those related in any way? Does Jason maybe think that they're talking about him when in fact they're not, but he just can't hear? So let's start with something simple like that. Yeah. What else?
Okay, now you heard my language being hearing impaired. In my person-centered plan, I used it on how do we help find people good friends. And so how to get support for myself, I told them, please look at me when you're talking. Please don't scream. Don't walk away when you're talking. Don't laugh at me if I misunderstand you, and to ask me in a different way. So, it's a conversation that can happen before they actually move in. Just a thought.
And supporting them with their own advocacy skills is what I hear you saying, is giving them potentially the words of what to say to remedy some of those situations.
Anybody else? All right. So yeah, there are lots of things that we can do. I have discovered a roommate compatibility chart. If you don't know what this is, it's awesome for anybody who lives with somebody else or wants to live with somebody else. It's actually for college students, but it allows you to kind of compare your preferences and your needs with a potential roommate's preferences or needs as well. Maybe Jason has fun hanging out with his friends every so often, but it's very different to live with people than to just hang out with them, right? Does he understand his budget? Can we do pros and cons? So all kinds of things. All right, last one. You want me to take this one, Celia, or you want to do it?
Sure, I'll take it. Ruth has worked in the same job for 25 years, and she thinks she's ready to retire. She's worried about upsetting her boss and her coworkers if she leaves, though, so she's not sure what to do. So in this case, Ruth's kind of already made her decision. What she's looking for is help to communicate that decision to others, which is another thing that someone who is a supporter can do. How could you support Ruth to make this decision, to know what her options are or what she might need to know?
Maybe thinking about all the positives of working where she was working and her coworkers and things like that. And then maybe that way she could go into a conversation with them and say, I really enjoyed working with you, and positives first.
Anybody else?
Something that I think of, Celia, is, what does she know already? I know I've talked to other people about this specific example, and they've said, well, does she even know what a resignation letter is? Has she ever written one? Right? Or does she know that she can technically retire and still work there part-time if she wants to. Right? So
There you go.
when we go back to that decision-making logic, does she know her options? Does she have enough information?
Yeah, yeah. And then what are those other supports she might have in place? In this case, Ruth can meet with her case manager. She could also meet with her counselor to practice and have this conversation about ways to tell people hard news. You know, I can relate to Ruth when I eventually get to a point where, because I hate disappointing people, and we all know in this field that we need more good people. So absolutely. But she's she, after doing this, she feels better and excited about her future, and then she can ask those people to have her back and feel confident and agree, you know, on how to move forward. So I think that's a great support. And then role playing always is an option, of trying to have that difficult conversation. And I think that's the case in any time you're doing decision making. Role playing is a great way to kind of get more comfortable.
Get better at things when we practice.
Mm-hmm. We already did this slide, didn't we? Are we doing this again?
This is just a review. Remember
Okay.
the decision-making process, because we're going to ask you some questions now about what your role is in each of these steps. So step one, finding the options and getting information. So remember Maggie, the surgery, right? What is your role here in helping her find options and get information? What is it that you should actually be doing? So in this case, your role is just to assist them to gather information about the decision and find the options that they want to choose from. That's it, right? Some things you might directly assist with, or assist them to find things on their own. So maybe search on the internet, talk to other people about things. The other things to remember in this step is that it can take time to get all of the information that we need to make an informed decision. And that the level of information that we seek, it does vary from person to person, because some people are happy to make decisions with not much information at all, or just based on one factor. Also, you don't need to be the one to find the information. Like we mentioned, you can support her to find the information for herself. This also may be a new experience for her. So be sure to go slow and check that she understands as you're going through this. We sometimes have a tendency to rush through things, either because we have limited time or because it's just not convenient for us to take that time. But when we do that, we're not sure that the person is really understanding. And finally, don't limit the decision maker's choice by limiting their access to information. That whole idea of lying by omission, like I didn't technically say a lie, but I left something out that could have definitely influenced that situation or that person's decision. All right, so step two, weighing choices. So this was Jason. What's your role as a supporter in helping people weigh their choices? For the sake of time, because I know we're getting close to running out, I'm going to go ahead.
Listening?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Listen and helping them weigh those, right? And these are going to be different to yours. So you should make sure to ask them for their opinion first, so that you don't sway their decision. I think Barb Safaris once said this, and it stuck with me. She said, the person with the most authority in the room should speak last. Because once that person speaks, their influence is out there, right? So yeah, ask them what they think. Think about possible outcomes of their decision. Imagine what their life would be like if they made this choice or that choice. So like, what are the good things that might happen, Jason, if you do this? Or what are the bad things that might happen? How much time and effort is it going to take to do that? You want to move with your friends? You ever moved before? You know how much time and effort that takes? What's it going to cost? So anytime we're helping people, these are questions that we can ask to help them weigh their choices.
And I love the idea of asking it in a question instead of presenting the weighted question answers. Oh, this is me. Sorry. So step three. So deciding what would your role be in the deciding process?
I'll jump in real quick. I mean, I think it's more listening and then kind of asking questions to help them form their own opinions and decision, but kind of just helping them like, okay, what are the pros and cons, what, just kind of helping them think through it without making the decision for them.
Yeah. Anybody else? Deb saying identifying the steps to be made, right?
Mm.
Anybody else? Tiffany, you unmuted.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
My kids are getting ready for bed at the same time. I'm trying to concentrate on just you guys, but
Oh, that's okay.
it's back and forth. Deciding, I was just gonna say being a sounding board and yeah, I agree. I think Sherry said asking questions and things like that. So
Yeah, so really our role here is very little, right? It's being there, kind of supporting the process and understanding that everybody's going to go through this part differently, right? And just kind of being along for the ride. Everybody is going to look at what the best option is differently. And the ideal option, weighing that out, the ideal option may not be a possibility, but helping them maximize their choice or see that. Everybody's different. So the best option for one person isn't always the best option for anybody. I think that one thing here is the timing of it, understanding that sometimes timing affects decision. So if you're looking at a sale and it's only today, that's a little tougher decision because you've got to decide whether you need to just go on it or not. Or maybe it's a decision to wait. Maybe you go to look to get an Airbnb or something, and the week that you wanted to go, there's nothing that either is in your price range or that fits what you want. So you decide to wait, right? And so timing and having them consider timing in all of it is really important. And some people kind of step over steps and bypass steps, or they change their mind, or they get new information that changes their mind. I think somebody had spoken about that early. But once the decision's been made, you might want to talk about and help them communicate the decision to other people. It can be done lots of ways, in writing, by talking, by using communication aids, by helping the person, just share their decision. Some people are going to be happy to tell others their decision. Other people might want to not share or write it down, or maybe even go so far as to write it down in some sort of agreement. But overall, you want to make sure that whatever you do, you're respecting the person in the process and respecting their decision. Sometimes you might think that the risks or the disadvantages, those cons, are too high, and the decision maker still wants to proceed with that option. And you've got to respect them in that process. That's that kind of dignity of risk. People might have anxiety talking or taking the step to actually make the decision, and supporting them through that. It's not your decision. So be careful not to lead the decision maker. This hits home into a certain conclusion. Be supportive, but not directive. And remember, supportive decision making is about assisting the decision maker to make the decision that they think is best for them, which may not be the same decision or option that you would take or that you believe is best for them. Go ahead.
All right, we're on the
Oh, it's me again. Yep. And the last one is Ruth. So if we're looking at acting on the decision, and you remember Ruth's story and announcing her retirement and letting her bosses know and her discomfort of that, what are some of the things that you might, what would your role be? I'm sorry.
maybe giving support and encouragement.
There you go.
Yeah, I was going to suggest just being a cheerleader.
There you go. Help her plan what she's going to do after. Bottle of champagne, maybe. Yeah. So again, you don't have to do much. Your decision maker may have the confidence and skills once they've gone through all these steps, because going through it, talking about it, supporting them through it gives you a level of confidence. They may want you to help support them as they work out the next steps. They may want you to help them get started. So it really, again, that listening comes into play. Sometimes your role in implementing decisions is to support the decision maker to be aware of or overcome any barriers. Again, that role play, what if this happens, right? Barriers can be created by a range of things, including lack of money, a negative attitude from other people, organizational policies, or social isolation. Every situation can be different, but you'll know when you're experiencing a barrier because the person can't put a decision into practice or into action. And I think somebody had talked about that earlier, when it's weighing on you and it's just not sitting right. And you might have to go back and revisit, right? And reconsider those decisions. But always remember that if other people can resist the decision maker's choice, you may need to support them by speaking out, right? Be creative, try find ways to make the decision maker, make sure that they're in control of the situation and seen as center to the process. This will help make sure that others are more helpful too in their process.
All right, so after you've done all of this, Celia, what about reflecting?
So we remember our friend, I don't remember his name, Chris.
Yep.
The 12-year-old who was managing this new job and having money. So what's your role when you support somebody when they're reflecting on their decision? What questions might you ask them to support them in thinking about it?
Maybe ask them how did it go?
Mm-hmm. How did it go? Did this work out the way you wanted it to? Anybody else? One of the questions I often am asked is, what would you have wanted to go differently, right? When I look back at it on myself.
But I remember somebody just a few minutes ago talked about if they make a decision, but they keep thinking about it, then maybe they feel like they didn't make the right decision. So how about checking in with somebody a little bit later to see if they're still happy with the decision that they made?
Yeah. Because it's not that you have to undo the decision, but it's that helping them reflect of what might I do if this isn't what I expected.
With
know?
his, did he spend his money wisely? Did he spend something and then regret getting it later?
Right. Or maybe he's holding on to it and afraid to spend it. And then you can talk about that. So it just lends itself to the conversation, right? And then you can just reflect on yourself. How was I as a supporter, right? What would I do differently? What did I learn so that I'm better the next time?
All right, so talked about decision making. One of the things we haven't dove into yet is risk, right? We talk about health and safety a lot, and it's important, but so is happiness. And we really can't avoid risk in life. So at some point, we kind of have to make our own decision about what level of risk we're willing to accept or not. And this is going to vary with every decision, but make sure we're considering the benefits as well as the risks. So something like this risk matrix can be really helpful when we're having conversations about risk or need to make a decision that involves some risk, because it's very easy to go to that hypothetical worst case scenario. What's the worst thing that could happen if they do this, right? But something that brings us back to maybe a more objective reality can be really beneficial. So this just helps us measure, all right, how likely is this thing to actually happen, and how bad would it actually be if it did happen? And before I move on to the next slide, I want you to look at this and ask yourself, if you were going to circle a region or an area on this to identify where growth typically happens for people, what would you circle? Would it be at the very, very low end there? Or would it include some moderate and occasionally even high risk for people when they're making decisions? Where do you actually grow? So when we talk about low risk, these are rare, unlikely, maybe they're possible, but the consequences is negligible, marginal. So maybe a possible side effect of a medication that you get a headache, right? Low risk, could happen. If it does, it doesn't ruin your life. All right, moderate risk. So this could depend on your financial situation, but maybe you spend $50 or $100 impulsively. You're going to notice it. Maybe you can't go out to eat as often for a while, but it's also not going to ruin your life. Then we get to high risk. So for us, maybe that's going 20 miles over the speed limit on the way to get somewhere, right? Or breaking some other laws. Again, there's no handbook. We have to have the conversations and talk through this. And then finally, extreme risk. We're probably going to try to avoid these, right? The really bad things, death, dismemberment, things that could hurt a lot of people, things like that. All right, so I think it's also important to just acknowledge that this is kind of what life is, just a series of these calculated risks. We take them for granted often. When I drive home today after this presentation, I'm taking some risk there, right? I've accepted that for myself and I do it every day, right? But risk is just a part of living. You're muted, Celia.
There we go. Sorry. So when we consider risk, it's important to take a real holistic perspective. If we talk about what might go wrong or the bad things that might happen, if the person decides to do the thing, whatever the decision is about, then we need to balance that out by talking about the risk of not doing the thing or of never getting the opportunity to do the thing. Because if we don't get those opportunities, then we get fewer experiences. So we're looking at that same kind of isolation that can happen. Research shows that the magnitude of risk presented by social isolation is very similar to the magnitude of obesity, smoking, lack of access to care, and physical inactivity. So if we're going to talk about the risk associated with those things, we need to talk about the other side of things as well. The risk is multidimensional. And so we need to consider it from more than one angle when we talk about it. And maybe it's, who wants to try something new, go on a date without staff, use Uber for the first time, something like that. There is a risk in doing those things, right? So sure, never mind that many of us have done those things pretty frequently. But is there a risk associated with not doing those things? Absolutely. A lack of experience, a lack of learning, a lack of opportunity and autonomy, and ultimately of self-determination. And these risks are very real as well. We know that people with more self-determination, for example, are actually better at resisting abuse and exploitation. And that people with less self-determination may be more at risk, especially their mental health and their emotional well-being.
All right, we're going to try to close with this. I know we're at the very end, but I'm going to stop sharing this and start sharing something else while I tell a story, but we really need your help with this one. All right, so I used to work with a guy named Evan. Not his real name, but that's what we're calling him today. All right, so what you need to know about Evan. Evan used a wheelchair. Evan was a really ambitious guy. He loved to try new things, had a lot of energy, loved going on adventures. When he was out in public, he would flash a smile and people would just gravitate towards him. Right? The other thing you should know about Evan is that he had a very rare disorder that caused him to try and hurt himself. He didn't want to do it, but he couldn't help it. So that might be him like biting his fingers or gouging at his face or hitting himself or even hitting other people that he liked, but he couldn't keep himself from doing it. So he chose to have wrist restraints and ankle restraints on his wheelchair because it helped him feel safe. Now, if he really wanted to, he could get out of those wrist and ankle restraints. So when Evan experienced any sort of kind of extreme emotion, whether it was good or bad, he was much more likely to hurt himself. So at one meeting, Evan told us, hey guys, I want to go skydiving. His dad, who was guardian, said, no way, I'm not going skydiving, probably for obvious reasons. So this happy safe grid is a way to have those conversations, to identify what our options are for decisions when we balance risk and happiness, because you can be really safe and really miserable. And that's really not what we want for ourselves or for anybody else. So what we need to hear from you is, that Evan wants to go skydiving. What are some of his other options that he could try? If not jumping out of a plane, what are some other options for decisions that he could make?
I actually was researching this earlier today. There are places where you could do indoor skydiving.
Great.
There's one down near Cincinnati, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So let's plot that. This is how it works. Now, I know Evan, so I'll tell you how happy or unhappy I think he would be, and you guys weigh in on how safe or unsafe. It's really not important that we all agree on this. We're just learning how to use the tool. So indoor skydiving, how happy would he be? Well, if actual skydiving, jumping out of a plane is the very top, then indoor skydiving is not going to be quite there, but still probably a cool experience for him. Now, what do you think? How safe or unsafe do you think indoor skydiving would be for him? And if you're not familiar, this is like a wind tunnel that goes up and down and you can float in. Where do you think this falls?
Depending on what his physical makeup is, it's potentially unsafe, but so much more safe than the actual airplane.
Yeah, safer than the airplane, right? And when you do indoor skydiving, there are actually staff there that can help you with that, right? You don't necessarily have to do it alone. So let's put it in, and we're using the I in indoor to indicate how safe. Let's put it right about here in the middle. All right, what's something else that Evan could do?
He could do a tandem dive when he's strapped to somebody.
Tandem dive. So how happy would he be? I mean, this is what he wants to do, right? How safe or unsafe do we think a tandem dive would be for him? Celia, you're making a face. What do you think?
I think it's way down at that end because I would never, ever jump out of a plane. They should not ask my opinion.
It's one good way to lose a provider.
And
Oh my goodness.
this is going to be a conversation we have. You don't just identify the thing and put it right up there. You talk about it. Now, for Evan, remember, if he's out of his restraints, he's much more likely to hurt himself or other people. And in general, you have free use of your arms and legs when you're floating, right? So it might be a little bit more unsafe. But now that we've got indoor skydiving there, we can rank this relative to that. So happier than indoor skydiving, but less safe than indoor skydiving. All right, give me maybe two more.
Not doing it at all.
All right, what Dad said, right?
Yep.
Don't do it. All right, so how happy? Well, we can probably all agree he's not going to be terribly happy about this. But how safe do you think that's going to be for Evan to just not go skydiving?
He won't know.
Celia says very safe. Deb says we don't know. What do you think? Remember what we know about Evan. The more
Maybe-
Not necessarily safe because he'll be unhappy, so he might lash out at that decision.
Yeah. So how do we feel when somebody tells us repeatedly that we can't do something that we really want to do?
Not happy.
Yeah, we get upset. And we know that when Evan gets upset, he is much more likely to hurt himself. So what initially seems like, he's going to be unhappy, but at least we're keeping him safe, is actually unhappy and unsafe for him. All right, one more.
Is there a virtual
There is virtual reality skydiving. So you put on that headset, you get the experience of it without actually having to leave your home or in his case, his wheelchair. So how happy would he be with that? Less happy than indoor skydiving, but he still gets the experience. How safe or unsafe do you think virtual reality skydiving is for Evan?
I think that's the most safe option.
All right, so the
Yeah.
most safe option. Like, okay, he might get a little nauseous. Maybe I've done VR and I got nauseous. But if that's the worst thing that's going to happen, yeah, it's probably the safest option. Let me put one other thing up here that I sometimes hear people say. Watch YouTube videos of other people going skydiving. He's not going to be happy with that, right? But how safe is he going to be if he watches YouTube videos? In general, pretty safe, right?
Yeah.
We could have the same conversation about not doing it, but in general, pretty safe. All right, so this is how you use that. You just plot all of these options, and you don't overlook anything. Everybody gets to plot their idea on here because it creates a really nice visual to help a person or a team make a decision by balancing safety and happiness. So in Evan's case, he actually went indoor skydiving. They found a place in Chicago for him to go, that wind tunnel. And we got a video of it. And it was amazing, right? And he has the biggest smile on his face. He had 2 staff from the indoor skydiving place with him. One on one side holding an arm and a leg, one on the other side holding an arm and a leg. Guess who else had the biggest smile on their face though?
His dad.
Yeah, mom and dad did, right? The way this happened is that we were in a meeting. This was 3 years of talking about this. We were in a meeting. Evan had to use the bathroom. His staff took him. And dad and mom looked at me and they said, I think we finally get it. We ride motorcycles. And if somebody told us that we couldn't ride motorcycles because they were dangerous, we would laugh at them and we would get on our bikes and we would ride away. And I think my son wants a similar experience. He wants that sense of adventure, of trying something new where there is some risk involved. So let's figure out how we can do this.
We're seeing your whole screen, Josh, not that it matters at this point, but.
You're up, Celia.
I'm up, so sorry. Wasn't paying attention. My slides didn't change. So we've gone through a lot tonight and we've shared a lot of tools. And I love tools because whether you pull them out later or not, they give you a visual, they give you an experience, right? And with experience comes new opportunity to do things differently or do things in a new way. So we've taken a great deal of time to make sure you understand the steps to decision making. We've taken a great deal of time to make sure that you understand your role in decision making. And we've taken time to give you the tools to work through that process alongside someone that you might be supporting in a way that should remind you of the things we learned today about our own personal bias, about safety versus happy, about really looking at those steps to decision making and how you might support a person. So next week we will go into the, let's see.
Here you go.
Oh, next week we will go into the how. How do we really do this, right? And then the following week we're set up so that you can bring someone along with you and really just work on choices and opportunities to discuss choices in that process and practice what you learn. So I know we're tight on time. I'm going to put in the chat box the Bitly if you can't use your phone to get the scanned QR code. We really do need you to complete the surveys. We want to get your feedback. Please give detailed feedback when given the opportunity. This is a new presentation and we're pretty pumped, but we want to tweak it and make it very much workable to what you need and want as you move forward. So we appreciate all of you. Are there any questions? I would do like, learned, and concerned, but I feel like it's 5 after and I want to respect people's time.
I think
So if anybody wants to unmute and say anything, please do. But please take a minute now and do that because I know you'll forget to do the survey if you wait till tomorrow. Is there anything you want to add, Deb?
Well, I love this. This is certainly not the way we did things in my household. We always made the decisions for my brother, whether he liked it or not, because what we thought was safe or doable as a family. And for me as a sibling, of course, I'm, the people pleaser, the daughter, wanting to follow the rules in the house. So there was so much tension that may not have been there had he been part of some kind of communication to let us know. He was a hitter as well, hand biter, everything. So that gave us the idea. He said no. So, our challenge is to encourage younger families to start working on this. Start at a younger age. And we've done several webinars with Charter Life Course for early childhood. And I put in one of the things that said, if not you, then who? And that's all about, our people are going to learn about sex, whether it's from you or someone else. And we suggest it's better to come from you. I don't think we have that privilege anymore to wait till they get older and hope they don't ever have to talk about it. So we really need to be proactive in that for their safety, and you'll feel safe about it too. So anyway, thank you so much, Celia and Josh, for doing all this work. I will be, once I finish editing it, I will send the edited version and all the pages in case someone didn't get them in the chat. I wanted to make sure everyone just kind of relaxed and stayed and tuned in.
Yeah.
So next week, on the date is 21st, 6:30 to 8 p.m. Bring your friends, bring your parents, other parents bring them, because you could work on this type of thing together. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
And Deb, please feel free to fill out a survey too, and let us know.
I'm on it.
Awesome. Okay, awesome, because your input is equally as important. Good
Yeah,
night, Susan. See you next week. Yay.
Yes, thank you so much. And Josh, I hope you didn't use all your gas trying to stay warm.
I got 53 miles left. I'm good.
Celia, I'll see you Friday.
Yes, you will. And Josh is going to be there too.
Oh, good. Well, I'm coming in a wheelchair if I feel up
If
to
you
it.
need a push here or there, you call on me. And
Thank you. I got
No problem.
our new Charter Life Course ambassador signed up to help me with it.
Yay. Good. I haven't met them. So yay.
Yeah. All right.
All
God
right.
bless you guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Josh. It's
All
a
right.
pleasure and an honor. Talk to you
too.
later.
Bye.
Bye.